Okay, good morning everybody on the West Coast. Glad you've joined us and come across onto the digital securities track. What a great summit we're having. As the accent's probably a bit of a giveaway, I'm sitting in London and was able to spend yesterday evening listening to the sessions. And it's been a great summit. What a well done to Draper Goren Holm. Let's get going. So what we want to do in the digital securities track today is talk about some significant developments in the institutional world. I think we've come to a key moment in time where the institutions are really stepping up now and making progress in digitization of securities and alternative assets. So let me just bring up a presentation for you. So as Shira said, I'm Head of Business Development for Ownera, and I want to talk to you this morning about a really important private markets digitization initiative that we've been leading the last few months across the industry. So first thing to say is that the private markets are massive, right? They've grown over the last decade. The private markets have grown twice as fast as the public markets. And just last year, we had almost $900 billion flow in private assets. This is also in the context of a significant amount of unallocated capital searching for investments. And quite amazingly, this massive market is virtually entirely offline. So going back to April, May time, all of us were really in the midst of the COVID crisis as it goes on now, but people were just becoming aware of the scale of the economic crisis. And I think also over the last few months, society as a whole has done in a few months probably a cultural change in terms of digital transformation that would have taken the next 5 years. And I think there's a number of different forces coming together at the same time. People being aware that you can do things online, that you don't have to get onto an aeroplane to meet clients, that you can bring together investors from all over the world. And this comes at a time where technology and also regulation is evolving to the point where we have the potential to digitize the private capital markets at a global level. So back in May, we had a big virtual workshop and pulled together a number of major institutions and tech players in the industry and started talking about what we could do to take private markets online and stand up a network within the next year to help private companies, to help large private companies. And that time in May suddenly seems quite a long time ago now, because over the last few months, we built a group, and that group now comprises over 70 institutions and tech companies. We have in that group some of the largest global banks, investment banks, asset managers, exchanges, custodians, and leading technology providers in this space. I can't name them where we are in the process at the moment, and we don't want to shout about things until we have things released that we can talk to. We know in past years, people have tended to maybe shout a bit early about things that they were planning to do. And we now have tremendous momentum within this group. So, group came together. What is it about? It's a group focused on a not-for-profit structure with a commitment to openness and inclusivity. And that's really reflected in the open breadth of organizations and type of organizations that we have involved in this group. And we're developing a global network to open up the private markets. And this is a network that will be open for all regulated institutions to operate as nodes on that network within an environment that's institutional grade, that provides the service from the regulated financial services industry at a global level. It's also a multi-vendor network. It's open to different technology providers, whether that's infrastructure or services in and around the private markets. It's also blockchain or distributed ledger technology agnostic. There are many initiatives around the world at the moment on different technologies, blockchain technologies, and this is presenting a real interoperability challenge. We see really islands that have emerged in the last couple of years that are really urging to be connected. And all of this is possible because we are committed to open interfaces, open source specifications, an environment in which networks can, markets in different jurisdictions can freely come together and connect this at a global level. All of this is aimed at giving us global distribution. So it's a little bit strange, but in capital markets between private and public, we sit in a binary world. We have this situation where private companies can be very large, and yet if they're not public, there'll be few investors, it's hard to raise capital, and there's minimal or no liquidity. If you go public, all of a sudden that binary change, you're now traded online by millions of retail investors. And at the moment, there's virtually nothing in between. This whole initiative looks to bridge that gap to create a level of elasticity between the private markets and the public markets. And this is all the more important in a world in which companies are just not going public in the way that they were a few years back, and there is a massive demand. So private markets today, I've said they're offline. The reality is they really can't scale, and they really can't scale for the demands that our world economies have in the coming years. Those pains can be broken into a number of different categories. If I was to talk about due diligence for etc., for example, there is separate customized due diligence for each and every transaction. Sometimes people feel that's there for good reason, but also it's there as a barrier. Dozens of meetings, no standards around company information for private companies. It's hard to get the information you need as an investor, no structured data. Likewise, the investor reach, there just isn't the distribution. There's no online network. In the private markets, a typical round might be pitched to only 30 or 50 investors. It's often who the CEO knows, who the banker knows. Known networks within certain cultures and environments are really very limited. Legal and regulatory, immensely complex. Every deal needs multiple lawyers. Every lawyer has a different answer, adds massive complexity. And then ultimately those, the life cycle of those shares, dividend payments, custody, etc., all of that is very inefficient, costly and time consuming. This all leads to a situation where you can have very large private companies where, you know, maybe founders, employees in share ownership schemes, etc., see no liquidity. It's all locked up. You know, if a large private company wants some of their cap table to be more liquid, they don't today have that option. And this all leads to most deals self-distributing. There hasn't really been the business model for large institutions to enter this space in the right way. This all adds up to a whole raft of barriers. And so what's been happening the last couple of years? It's not that nothing's been happening. The reality is that virtually every major exchange, every large financial institution has an important private markets initiatives up and running. Everybody understands there's great opportunity with the private markets, but it's how do you get there? And these today are operating as islands. So what we're doing with the private markets initiative is connecting that, is providing that distribution, potentially where allowed to bring any asset, equity, debt, funds to any appropriate investor globally. Within that network, the financial institutions are key. They form the regulated backbone for this global network, and they have a number of roles. And they will bring assets and investors to this network. And their reputation will stand by the assets that they present in this network. So we see it as an environment that will drive up quality of assets, so the investors really will find the companies and deals that they want to invest in. Okay, how are we doing all of this? So the group is developing a technology we call Fin P2P, Fin peer-to-peer. And the challenge that we have is we understand there are these sub-markets all over the world, many developed on different DLT technologies. How do you connect them? How do you drive interoperability between all of them? That's what we're doing. We're developing a thin routing network that interconnects different DLT markets across the world. It's published, it'll be published with open source specs based on open interfaces and APIs. Ultimately, our goal is for every asset, where appropriate, to reach every eligible investor in whichever jurisdiction to see and invest in those assets. And this is rapidly evolving. We have the specs for these APIs well developed. I'm very happy to say that we're now entering a whole pilot program that we hope to be able to talk about in a little bit more detail in the coming months. So there we go. So now we're on the journey to taking private markets online and tackling each of those pain points. So you can see that due diligence, we have these problems, customized due diligence with every transaction. This network will standardize data. It recognizes a world where people don't have to get on aircraft to go and meet investors. I think we're all culturally adapting to bringing together parties across the world to make deals happen. And this network will structure data such that you can, as an investor, you can easily get hold of the right information you want about companies you wish to invest in. All of this enables the investor reach, right? So this will deliver an online network to potentially hundreds of thousands of institutional investors. And I hasten to add, this whole network is geared around institutional investors. It's not crowdfunding. We're talking about large private companies, pre-IPO, looking to reach investors across the world. Legal and regulatory likewise. Once you can start to drive this standardization, you can start to standardize where appropriate the legal frameworks. This network will also include a powerful structure for matching and adhering to regulation and legal requirements across jurisdiction between assets and investors. Simplified, unified, automated. And ultimately, this leads to an efficient platform, a platform that can manage custody, can manage the life cycle of a shares, the life cycle of a cap table for a company. This will enable us to do transactions in seconds rather than weeks. You'll have online dashboards, live cap tables, and everything that you would expect in the public markets, but as a private company. Ultimately, this gives us the liquidity we want. This enables founders, CEOs, employees of companies to have some of their cap table digital, to enable them to get some of the liquidity and unlock the value that they have in their organization. And the last point is incredibly important. Once you have a new business model such as this, once you have this structure, it enables financial institutions to engage in deals that maybe were not efficient or profitable for them to engage in historically. As this enables banks to engage with companies that may have valuations between, say, 200 million and $1 billion, whereas in the past, these large institutions have really only been able to focus on the larger value organizations. So we're very excited about this. It's got tremendous momentum. In the last 6 months, it's come a long way, which is probably why you haven't heard so much about it. And we're now moving at a tremendous pace. So this is really the first time that we've been able to give you a little peek insight into what is going on across the financial services industry in this space. In the next few months, expect to hear a lot more about deliveries that we have coming down the line for this. And next year, we expect to be in an environment where we can deliver a network to large private companies, enable them to reach investors across the world, bring some liquidity to their cap table, and help our global economies in a time and a place where I think they need that help right now. And, you know, we have great companies out there across the world. We've got investors in different countries looking to reach those companies. We're looking to unlock that, to bring that online. So we look forward to getting more and more involved in that journey as we go forward. Okay, that's it for my initial presentation. I think we're going to take a short break, and then I have some really interesting panel members to bring online with you and have a little bit of discussion about some of the institutional, legal and regulatory advances that are happening in this space.